I'm talking to the web design class, and I'm going to talk about a CSS attribute or a property called the position property. And I'm pulling this from w3schools.com. You can look it up yourself, but the position property is going to be really helpful on this assignment 7 phase 2. So I may be just reading this and then maybe giving some explanation, but the position property specifies the type of positioning method used for an element. 5 different position values you can use, and I'll go through each one. So here we go. So the first one we'll cover is static. So if you don't put anything on an HTML element, it is static by default. Static positioned elements are not affected by top, bottom, left, or right properties. An element with a static position, static, semicolon, is not positioned in any special way. It always is positioned according to the normal flow of the page. So this green rectangle, see how I'm scrolling up and down? That has a position of static. Here's the CSS for that. If my div had a class of static, this is how we'd write it, div.static. And I can confirm that. I'm going to choose try it yourself so we can see that for sure. But here's the position, property, and it's describing this div as static, and then there's a green border on it. So we're going to go look at this try it yourself, which are super valuable. Okay, I'm going to maybe move this around a little bit. So okay, so you can see, so in this particular, and you haven't seen this before, I haven't talked about it before, but you can put CSS values and descriptions in the style part of an HTML document. Now we're not doing that because there's more benefits to doing it in a separate document, which we're kind of practicing with the codepen.io. But this can be done, and it works for these tryout purposes. So here's our div. The class is static, so I think I said that correctly because it has a dot in front of it. And if we go over, so this is what's going on. The div with a class of static, the position is static, and the border is this 3 pixels in green. And this is it. There's no like magic thing. It's just placed very basically in the text. Okay, so we're going to go back out of this and back to go on to the next value. So now we'll talk about the position relative. It's positioned relative to its normal position. So the setting top, right, bottom, and left properties of a relatively positioned item will cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position, unlike the static, where they're not affected by the top, bottom, left, and right properties. So you can see this green. This green box here has they call it relative. They've done a class called relative, just so we can see the position attribute is relative. And they put a left attribute to it of 30 pixels, and so it usually would have lined up with this text, but it bumped in 30 pixels. So that's why we're getting this bumped in. And so if you say top with a 30, this will drop down 30 pixels from the top. Okay. So again, you're welcome to go into this w3schools.com and look at the positioning, position property page. Okay, so I'm going to run to the next one, position fixed. So this one's really interesting. The position, if something has an element has a position fixed, the position is relative to the viewport, which means it stays in the window even when the window scrolls. So this fixed element does not leave a gap in the page where it would normally have been located. It just sits right over it. Let me show you an example of it. Oops. Okay. So this element right here is fixed. Try to slide that over a little bit. And as I scroll, everything, it just stays on top of everything. That's the fixed element. That's what it does. I don't see many uses for it, but either way, that's the attribute. And you can tell it exactly where it is by doing a bottom right and how, width and color and things like that. But that's the fixed. The absolute position, it has to be relative to something, and it's relative to its nearest positioned ancestor. So we'll go and look at an example on this, but and see this big box here, this is the ancestor. So this div element has a position of relative. And note, this positioned element is one that works with anything except static. So the nice thing about this, if you want to move something around, you can have a element or a div that has some position besides static, and then you can have some element in there and move it around. So here's our relative. It has a 400 pixel, 200 height. It's this outside big green one. But the smaller one, width of 200, height of 100, and then it only has a top and a top of 80 and a right of 0. So this is 80 pixels from the top and a right of 0. Let's do a try it yourself so we can see how this works. Okay, so here's again some CSS inside the HTML, and then we see the result here. I'm going to make some changes to it, and then I'll click Run. So instead of a top of 80, I'm going to change it to, actually let me try to reduce this so you can see it actually working. I'm going to change the top to 40, so it's going to go, halfway up. And then instead of right, we'll do left. And I'll choose Run, and it moves 40 up, and it's over flush left now. We could center this exactly and position it by just doing some math. So if we did want to center a 200 pixel rectangle inside of 400, then from the left would be 100 pixels. And if we wanted to center it from top to bottom, this is 100, that's 200, it should be 50 on each side. So I'll choose 50 here, we'll run it, and that gets centered absolutely in the middle of this rectangle. I'll just scroll this over so you can see it. Okay, so that's the idea of this absolute. It can be very useful in placing, help locating items. And I'm bringing this up to you because it'll again be very useful on phase 2. The last one I'll go over is called sticky. And so sticky toggles between relative and fixed, and it's usually used, here's the example right here. So if I scroll up, you can see this looks relative, and then as soon as I scroll and gets to the top, it sticks to the top. Okay, I can see navigation or something like that working this way, but that is the sticky attribute for position. And there's an example, you can try it yourself. This is an interesting one, this overlapping elements it goes into with a z-index, so you can place things on top by entering a CSS descriptor of z-index and then -1 means it's one layer behind the normal layer. Okay, so this particular IMG or image of W3 is a -1. That's why we have this heading and the text over the top of it. And you can try it out yourself. There's more in here that you can go into and look at, but that's all that I really wanted to review. This layout is going to be important for you on this one, so check it out.